Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Abdulkader. I'm the Executive Director of the Stevens Initiative, managed by the Aspen Institute. We hope you've all had a wonderful summer, and because of the summer break and the recent Eid holiday, we're hosting the second informational webinar ahead of our 2018 grant competition. As many of you know, we expect to make awards for seeding new and innovative and exciting virtual exchange programs, as well as awards to scale other projects and grow the field of virtual exchange. I'm joined here today by the Stevens Initiative team, and the rest of this webinar will be led by my colleagues Henry Shepard and Christine Schau. Virtual exchange provides a tremendous opportunity for young people in the United States to connect and learn with their peers in the Middle East and North Africa. We're excited that you are interested in being a part of this very important work. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please make sure to type it in the question box on your screen, and we will do our best to address it during the question and answer period. If we can't get to your question during this time, we will make sure to answer it and post it in our frequently asked questions page, which you will see on Fluid Review in addition to our website. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar and for your interest in the Stevens Initiative and virtual exchange. Henry, take us away.
Thanks very much, Mohammed. Just to give a brief overview of what we'll be covering today, we'll start off with a brief introduction to the Stevens Initiative. We'll talk about the rules and other eligibility criteria for the award competition. We'll talk about the priorities that we've stated for making this round of awards. We'll discuss the selection criteria that our independent review committee will be using. We'll cover some important issues related to the budget and compliance, and then we'll go into a lengthy question and answer session where, as Mohammed said, we'll answer as many of the questions we can that come in through the questions box inside this webinar. If you have any technical issues at any point during the webinar, please type your technical questions about the webinar, whether you're having audio problems or something like that, into the chat box. So again, the questions box for any questions about the award competition, and the chat box if you're having any issues following this webinar. Finally, we'll discuss some means of support that we're providing for applicants, listing some places where you can find additional information. Let's start by talking about the mission of the Stevens Initiative. The Stevens Initiative is an international effort to build global competence for young people in the United States and the Middle East and North Africa by growing and enhancing the field of virtual exchange. The initiative was created by the J. Christopher Stevens Fund and is an international effort to expand access to virtual exchange to build global competence. The initiative is managed by the Aspen Institute through a cooperative agreement with the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs of the U.S. Department of State, with additional funding from the Bezos Family Foundation and the governments of Morocco and the United Arab Emirates. Private sector supporters include video and Twitter. The initiative is a lasting tribute to Ambassador J. Christopher Stevens, a public servant who dedicated himself to building understanding between people from different countries, particularly between the United States and the Middle East and North Africa. What do we mean when we say virtual exchange? We don't hold to a strict definition, but when we talk about virtual exchange, we're generally talking about programs that connect young people to learn and work together in different countries around the world. We think it's important that virtual exchange programs be sustained over a period of time through either asynchronous and/or synchronous communication, so live communication or communication that happens through messages that people can read at different times. We think it's important that virtual exchange be facilitated and supervised by educators or other trained facilitators. Again, this is not a strict definition that we hold. We know that there are many different program designs out there, but we think it is important to keep these principles in mind because these are very important aspects of many high-quality virtual exchange programs. The Stevens Initiative has three main areas of work. First, we make grants or awards to support promising virtual exchange programs. Second, we try to serve as a knowledge hub to share information between different practitioners based on what we're learning from the programs we support and based on what other people in the field are learning and can share about what makes a good program. Finally, we share the messages from practitioners, and we try to bring the message of the value of virtual exchange to a broader audience and to the leaders who are in a position to bring virtual exchange to their communities. Going into more detail about our past grant making, we have conducted 2 award competitions, one in 2015 and one in 2016. This is the 3rd award competition. And in the past award competitions, we've given 22 awards for programs that have reached about 28,000 young people across 43 US states, Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia, as well as in 16 countries in the Middle East and North Africa and the Palestinian territories. Let's dive into the details of this award competition. The most important detail is that the deadline for submitting the proposal, which we call the letter of interest, is September 13th at 11:59 p.m. US Eastern Time. There are no exceptions and no extensions for this deadline. As I mentioned, the competition begins with a letter of interest, which is a relatively short application form. And there is also what we're calling the survey of the field to collect a little bit more information about applicants' past virtual exchange activities. I'll talk more about the survey of the field in a moment. All of these forms are required to be submitted through our competition website, which is listed on the screen here, aspen.fluidreview.com. So again, organizations must work on their application on the website aspen.fluidreview.com, and they must submit their letter of interest by September 13th at 11:59 p.m. US Eastern Time. Applying organizations must be based in the United States or in the Middle East and North Africa or MENA region. US-based applicants must be tax-exempt nonprofit organizations, including educational institutions, and MENA region-based applicants must be nonprofit organizations, including educational institutions, that can demonstrate current in-country registration in the country where they're based. Other organizations are not eligible to be the prime applicant, though they may be included as a subawardee or as a contractor. Staff who are working with the Stevens Initiative should be proficient in English and able to file reports and conduct evaluations in English, as well as in Arabic or French as appropriate. Activities must be conducted in the countries listed on this screen, and the countries listed here are the United States and one or more of the following countries in the Middle East and North Africa as we define that list. This is a list based on the countries that are included in the Near Eastern Affairs Bureau of the US Department of State, one of our key partners. Programs that involve refugees from these countries who are currently in other countries are also eligible. And if you have any questions about what counts as a refugee or where these refugees might be located, please follow up with us with any questions you might have. So again, the activities must be occurring in the United States and in one of the countries listed here. The award period of performance, or the duration of the award, should be 27 months, beginning April 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2021. The first several months of the award should be used to prepare for the virtual exchange activities. We know how much time and effort it can take to finalize partnerships, put in place technology, finalize a curriculum, and take many other preparatory steps. And that's why we feel it's important that the summer of 2019 be used to prepare for virtual exchange activities beginning during the fall 2019 academic term. And the length of this award allows awardees to continue conducting their programs for 2 full academic years through the spring 2021 academic term. Participants in these virtual exchange programs should be young people in the age range that corresponds to middle school, high school, undergraduate, graduate education levels, as well as young professionals under the age of 35. If an applicant has any questions about who qualifies in these age ranges or is interested in reaching anyone on the edge of these age ranges, you're welcome to contact us with any questions you might have, or refer to our frequently asked questions page, which Mohammed mentioned earlier, to see any related questions. Educators, facilitators, or group leaders who work with the youth participants are also counted as participants for the purpose of travel, but are not counted as part of the youth participants number in the big picture of counting participants in this program. We have what we call an 80% budget rule, which means that an organization can request no more than 80% of the amount of their fiscal year 2017 operating budget. This year, we're offering two types of awards, seeding awards and scaling awards. When an applicant is putting in their application, they must select whether they're seeking a seeding award or a scaling award before they get started with their letter of interest. Seeding awards support promising new virtual exchange programs at the proof of concept stage so that they can test, refine, and evaluate their models. These proposals must demonstrate the potential to find an institutional home, to replicate, and to scale in the future. Scaling awards support innovators and institutions that are ready to expand an existing successful virtual exchange program. These proposals must demonstrate an intention and a pathway to scaling up considerably while reducing cost per participant in the future. Let's go into some of the details of the seeding and scaling awards. The permissible budget range for the seeding or earlier stage awards is $100,000 to $300,000 over the whole 27 months of the award. These programs must reach between 100 and 750 youth participants, and the cost per participant must be between $400 per participant and $1,000 per participant. We calculate, for the purposes of this stage of the application, the cost per participant to be the total budget request that is being presented to the Stevens Initiative divided by the total number of youth participants. The letter of interest or the application at the next stage must satisfy all of these range requirements simultaneously. So all the budget range, the number of youth participants, and the cost per participant must fall within the range for the seeding award in order for a seeding proposal to be eligible. I'll discuss the survey of the field form in more detail in a few minutes. I would just like to point out that the survey of the field form is optional for seeding applicants. Now let's talk about scaling awards. The budget range for scaling awards, which are better established, proven virtual exchange programs, is $350,000 to $1 million over the course of the 27 months of the period of performance. The number of participants should be between 1,000 and 8,000 over the period of the award, and the cost per participant range is more strict, $100 to $350 per participant. And again, any scaling proposal must meet all of these range requirements. Unlike the seeding award, submitting the survey of the field form by September 13th is required of scaling applicants. So let's talk a little bit more about the survey of the field. We have created the survey of the field form to shed light on the size and dynamics of the virtual exchange field so that we can understand which programs were conducted during the 2017-2018 academic year. Filling out the form, as I mentioned, is required of scaling applicants and optional for seeding applicants. And it's not limited to organizations that are seeking an award. Any organization that conducted virtual exchange between the United States and any other part of the world is invited and welcome to submit the survey of the field. After we receive the responses, we will try to publish our results so that we can all better understand the size of the field and any interesting developments or dynamics that we're observing in the field. And we think that by running this regularly in the future, we will continue to get a clearer picture of where the field is headed. After the letters of interest are submitted, they are reviewed and scored by an independent committee of experts from related fields. A subset of those organizations that submit a letter of interest will be invited to submit a full application sometime in October, which asks for much more information about the proposed program, including a detailed budget, timeline, and many other supporting documents. Let's talk a little bit about the priorities that we've stated for this competition. First, we've identified a few topics that we think are very well aligned with virtual exchange and that we would like to see proposals focused on these topics. They are technology and computing, world affairs and global studies, business and entrepreneurship, and language learning and practice. There's much more information on the competition website that explains what we mean by these topics and why we think they're so important. Organizations are not required to address one of these topics, but we do put a priority on proposals that address one or more of these topics. It's very important to the Stevens Initiative to have virtual exchange programs reach young people who have not historically had enough opportunities for international education and exchange. That's why we make it a priority to reach women and girls, underserved youth whose access to international exchange has been limited in a variety of ways, refugees, people with disabilities, and underserved minority groups, both in the United States and across the Middle East and North Africa. As with the priority topics, we have more information about these diverse participant groups listed on our competition website, so we encourage you to check the website for more details. We've also established a few priorities that we call invitational priorities. These are things that we and our partners are particularly interested in seeing, but that are not strict requirements of any proposal. So these are attributes of a proposal that we would like to see, but that are not required, and not including any of these aspects is not going to be counted against an applicant. So the invitational priorities are to run a program that has participants and institutions located in Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, Libya, or in the Palestinian territories. We're also interested in seeing programs that would involve intra-regional interaction, such as between Israeli participants and those in other countries in the Middle East and North Africa. And keep in mind that these intra-regional interaction programs must still include participants from the United States. We're also interested in seeing proposals that include community engagement and community service for young people as a component of their virtual exchange activity. We've also opened our application process to proposals that have an additional focus on evaluation, which we're calling our Impact Evaluation Supplement. All awardees of the Stevens Initiative must conduct a certain level of evaluation, and that will be expected of all awardees through this round as well. But we're providing some additional funds to a few applicants who will conduct an even more rigorous evaluation of the impact of their program. There are 3 different types of impact evaluation that we are considering. The first is a randomized control trial where appropriate. The second would be to use a quasi-experimental design. And the third would be to do something that we call program feature variation. I strongly encourage anyone who has extensive experience monitoring and evaluating virtual exchange and is interested in pursuing this supplement to visit our competition website on Fluid Review to learn more about what we mean by these terms and how to submit this as part of your proposal. The form for the letter of interest in Fluid Review has a page with additional questions that are optional, but that anyone interested in submitting the impact evaluation supplement should fill out as they work on their application. The range for the supplemental budget for impact evaluation is between $50,000 and $125,000. So that is funding that we would make available in addition to the funding that we are providing to all applicants. And any proposal should make it clear how this additional funding would be used at the next stage of the application process. At the letter of interest stage, we're just looking for ideas and enthusiasm. This screen lists the 9 items that we have listed in our selection criteria. Briefly, they are the feasibility of the proposed program, the capacity of the applicant and its partners to conduct the program, the degree to which a program addresses one or more of the priority topics we discussed a few minutes ago, the degree to which the program helps young people build their global competencies, which are listed in more detail on our website as well as on the Department of Education website, the degree to which the program helps young people build their practical skills, including vocational and technical skills and other skills they need for the workplace, the degree to which the program can reach diverse participants, the degree to which the program meets a sincere and strong need of the young people and the communities that would be served, the degree to which the program appeals to the young people and the facilitators who would be involved in the program. And finally, the plan and vision that the proposal has for the growth of the program and for its long-term sustainability after the period of Stevens Initiative funding ends. I'm pleased to turn the floor over to my colleague, Christine, to walk us through some issues related to budget and compliance.
Thank you, Henry. Hello, everyone. I'm Christine Shaw, one of the assistant directors on the initiative. Over the next few minutes, I will briefly touch on some budgeting and compliance requirements and terminology that will hopefully be helpful information to you, and at the very least, good context as you refine your letters of interest, overall program plans, and begin the initial build out of your budgets. As Henry mentioned earlier, our funding comes from the Department of State, and as such, the funds are governed by specific regulations. These regulations are listed within the Uniform Guidance, which is basically a U.S. government-wide framework for grants management. If you have the time or feel so inclined, you can familiarize yourself with these regulations, although it is not required at this time. The next slide has some very technical language on it. It highlights that the Aspen Institute is the managing partner of the Stevens Initiative and is considered the pass-through entity. As a pass-through entity, the Institute is responsible for monitoring your work and helping ensure you reach your deliverables in accordance with the terms and conditions of your award agreement. Also, something to keep in mind if your proposal is approved is that you will become a subrecipient to the Aspen Institute and are required to adhere to the guidance mentioned in the prior slides. As you think about your budgets, note that any costs you propose should align with the proposal and meet the following criteria. They should be allowable, reasonable, allocable, and necessary to conduct the activities outlined. To briefly go over these definitions, allowable means that costs should adhere to the federal cost principles and have consistent treatment through generally accepted accounting principles. Reasonable, meaning that an objective individual would agree that the cost is appropriate for the work proposed and must be able to withstand public scrutiny and is also necessary to complete the work. Allocable means that costs incurred to support the work are outlined in the award agreement and are again necessary to conduct the work. On the next slide, we have examples of some disallowed cost and relatedly on face value, some allowable costs as well. Examples of disallowed costs include entertainment costs and alcohol. Some examples of allowable costs are personnel and fringe benefits, travel, facilitator and educator support, professional development, technology fees, software supplies, or curriculum development and maintenance, to name a few. This slide outlines the main cost categories. Any cost or activity that's proposed must fall under one of these cost categories. At this stage, you are not being asked to submit a full budget, but again, it's very good framing for you to have. Some questions that would be helpful for you to think about, because it may be the bulk of your budget request, is what personnel are essential to carrying out the program and what percentage of their time is needed. You should also think about your implementing partners and begin those discussions around what it will take on their end to help successfully implement this program. I also want to draw your attention and mention, as you look at the list, that there's a distinction between costs classified as contractual and costs classified as subawards. The main distinction is that a subaward has programmatic decision-making abilities and their performance is measured against the overall program. Whereas a contractor works in a competitive environment and is hired to deliver a specific good or service. And at the conclusion of delivering that good or service, their involvement with the program ends. Therefore, their involvement with the program is considered ancillary. And just to tick through those again, those cost categories are personnel, staff travel, participant support, which includes participant travel and stipends and registration costs, supplies, contractual, subaward, other direct costs, and indirect costs. The next slide talks about indirect costs, which are sometimes referred to as overhead costs. For those who are unfamiliar, a NICRA is a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement between the organization and the U.S. federal government. If you have a NICRA, the Aspen Institute is required to acknowledge your NICRA. If you do not have a NICRA and you've never received one, then you are eligible to receive the 10% de minimis rate. You may also negotiate a rate that is other than the de minimis rate, but you must substantiate your claim for this rate by submitting your last 3 years of financial statements that shows the indirect cost rate and the base that that rate is calculated upon. The Institute, however, is not required to approve this rate, although we may entertain it. The final slide discusses cost shares and reiterates that cost share is voluntary, and that if you decide to submit cost share, these costs must be verifiable from your financial records. That is all I have for budget and compliance at this time. We are now going to open it up for questions and answers. So I will turn it over to Henry for now.
Thanks very much, Christine. This is the time when we're very pleased to invite all of you listening to this webinar to type your questions in the questions box here in GoToWebinar. So look in the dashboard for the webinar and type in the questions box any questions you might have. We'll wait for a few moments while you all type in your questions. We'll start with a question about the nature of the awards that we're making. The question is, are there any educational scholarships that are part of this program? I think it's important to keep in mind that the Stevens Initiative is making awards to organizations to conduct online programs, which we call virtual exchange, for many young people to have an international experience using the internet. And so this is not exactly a scholarship or a scholarship competition, and it's not for, this competition is not intended for an individual applicant. The competition is to give funds to an organization to run a large program, and the applicant must be a nonprofit organization or a nonprofit educational institution, either in the United States or in the Middle East or North Africa. And so this isn't exactly a scholarship or a travel competition in itself, although the program should include educational activities, and it may also include an in-person exchange component in addition to the virtual exchange component. So thanks very much for that question.
And to add to that, I think we had a question on what reasonable travel costs are there if the programs are virtual. And as Henry had alluded to, your programs may include an in-person component for either staff, for educators and facilitators to travel and to meet their counterparts, and or depending on your program design, you may wish to have an in-person component for the participants, the youth participants as well. And allowable travel costs include all the typical costs. It could flight, hotel costs, as long as they fall under certain per diem limits, which we can get into details about later. It includes travel stipends if needed as well, and of course food costs as well.
Thanks, Christine. Our next question is about the number of applicants or letters of interest that an organization can submit. The question is, can a single institution apply for both a seeding and a scaling award in 2 different proposals? And the answer is yes. An organization can submit more than 1 letter of interest. It could be 1 seeding proposal and 1 scaling proposal. It could be 2 seeding proposals. It could be any combination of seeding and scaling proposals. It's very important to keep in mind that these proposals must be completely different and separate from each other, so that the organization is proposing 1 set of work through 1 proposal and a different set of work through the other proposal. And it's also important to keep in mind that the organization should only submit multiple proposals if the organization would be capable of running both sets of work if they received both awards. So the proposals should not be proposing for the same set of employees to conduct a whole program or another whole program that are using the same resources and staff time, because these would be impossible to run if both proposals were accepted. I hope that answers the question.
We have a question on whether or not It is allowable to include stipends for youth or educator/teacher participants in a workshop. To answer that question, yes, it is absolutely allowable to include stipends for educator and teachers, but providing stipends to youth participants is not an allowable cost.
Our next question is about the location or the identification of partners in a proposal. The question is, do we need to start with partners in both regions, or can a United States or MENA region organization submit a proposal with the goal of finding a suitable partner if awarded the funding? This is a tricky question because the stages of a partnership are very complex, and we know that it takes a lot of time and effort to form a strong partnership. As with any aspect of a proposal, it's important that our independent review committee be very confident that the proposed plan is feasible, that the work has been done to put the plan in place, and that if the proposal is received, is given an award, that in the time between when the award is made and the beginning of the fall semester, that everything would be ready to go, and they would be highly confident that it would be a successful activity. And so I think it's fair to say that as much information as you can provide about the partners would be very valuable to the review committee, because the proposals that are strongest are proposals that clearly explain who the partners will be, what the curriculum will be, the technology, how the partners will solve logistical challenges like time zone differences and other factors. And a proposal that does not identify who the international partner will be is very likely to not be strong on those many different aspects of program design. So having a fully executed partnership with an international organization is not strictly required, but knowing who your partners will be is very advantageous to the strength of a proposal.
Henry, we have another question regarding a potential applicant having a very low budget in 2017, and they're wondering whether or not they should be applying for a scaling award, which seems contradictory to the budget parameters. Do you have any advice?
Thanks, this is a great question. I think it might seem a little counterintuitive for an organization that has been running virtual exchange to request a small amount of funding. But I do think it is appropriate to submit an application for the appropriate size of award based on the organization's overall budget, because a smaller program is better suited to receiving a seeding award rather than a scaling award. I think this is true of small or young organizations, regardless of how long they've been running virtual exchange. So it does seem appropriate to submit for a seeding award, recognizing that now might be the time for the organization to take a small but strong program and help it become ready to scale up significantly in the future. We'll take a moment and pause and ask again for you to type any questions you might have in the question box.
We have a question on examples of allowable other direct costs. It's kind of a simple and a complicated answer. It really depends on how your organization classifies other direct costs. I've seen stipends as example being listed under other direct costs. Sometimes I've seen if you are having some sort of event, if it's been approved by us, I've seen those costs included there as well. I've also seen internet costs included under other direct costs. So it kind of seems to be a catch-all for anything that doesn't squarely fall under any of the other categories. But again, it's going to be based upon how your organization does their own financial breakdowns. Thank you.
We have a question here about examples, asking if we can give some examples of what should be a good contractual partner and what should be a sub-awardee. And Christine, I'm wondering if maybe you can take this question as well.
Sure. An example of a contractual partner would be potentially if you were designing a website and you needed to hire a vendor to create a website and or someone to do curriculum development. Those would be specific services and or deliverables that you're looking for. Those types of people typically operate in a competitive environment. And like I said, again, they're there to provide one piece of the program, and once that's complete, they're basically no longer involved in the program, typically. Example of sub-awardees are going to be your implementing partners, whether that's in the US and or in the MENA region. So typically they're universities and or other NGOs who are going to be implementing those programs on the ground.
We've received some questions about whether it's acceptable to include partnerships in other regions outside the United States or outside the Middle East and North Africa. And unfortunately, the Stevens Initiative is not able to support any activities outside the United States or the Middle East and North Africa. We focus solely on these countries and regions. So if an organization is trying to run or is running virtual exchange that includes young people from outside these places, unfortunately, the Stevens Initiative cannot support that part of the work. We can only support activities in the eligible countries.
We have a question regarding video deliverables. So it's a two-part question, which says whether or not the Stevens Initiative is going to require videos from each awardee. The answer to that is it will be on a case-by-case basis. Perhaps not everyone's going to be required, but at the end of the day, if we find that each program is interesting enough or kind of worth highlighting or worth investing more into, we might decide to work with each individual awardee, but it will be on a case-by-case basis. The second part of that question is whether or not those costs will be included in the contract or request line, and yes, typically when you're working with a video editor or a videographer, those costs would be included in the contractual line.
There's a question here about the priority topics that we listed. Again, the priority topics that we listed are tech and computing, world and global affairs, business and entrepreneurship, and language learning and practice. And the question is, should these be in the applicant's current programming with the goal of adding an international component? This is an interesting question because we see people conducting virtual exchange programs based on their prior experience in several different fields. Some organizations that apply for Stevens Initiative funding primarily conduct in-person exchange. And for these organizations, the curriculum or topic might be very familiar for them, but the technology being used might be the new component. Some institutions have been running virtual exchange programs for many years, but they might propose a program that takes on a new focus in one of our priority topic areas. So I think it's fair to say that it would be very valuable for the applicant to have some experience related to the proposed program, either with the technology or with the topic or with the community that they would be serving. And that they would have access to or have already trained some educators or other facilitators to play a supervising and facilitating role, but it's not strictly required that the applicant have experience in all of those areas. We have a question referring back to a comment that we made earlier about refugees in other non-Middle East and North Africa regions being eligible as participants. And what we mean by that is that the refugees in the proposed programs must be people who are from the Middle East and North Africa, using the list that we shared earlier, but they may be located in countries outside the Middle East and North Africa as we defined it on that slide. So for example, a proposed participant could be a young person from Syria, but they do not need to be located in Syria or in any of the neighboring countries in the Middle East and North Africa. They could be located in a country outside of the Middle East and North Africa region. But this is going to be considered on a case-by-case basis to see if the proposal is appropriate in general. I should also say that many organizations are interested in making it a priority to reach refugees who are already in the United States. And while we value the inclusion of refugees in the United States, and while this is allowed, this in and of itself does not meet our expectations for including refugees, because we're trying to connect young people who are located in the United States with young people who are located outside the United States. And so refugees located in the United States would not meet that expectation, although they would be very welcome to be included in a proposal. There's a question here asking if we could define supervision a bit clearer. And I think what this might be referring to is when we talk about how a program should be facilitated and supervised by an educator or other facilitator. What we mean by that is that activities occurring in an online space should be followed and observed and supported by adults who are responsible to ensure that the communication is appropriate, that it's constructive, that it's based on a curriculum so that the young people are safe and learning and working together effectively. So supervision means that the activities that are occurring are being followed and understood by adults who are responsible to ensure that they are both happening safely and appropriately, and that they have an educational value. I hope that goes towards addressing the question. We have a follow-up question asking, is it permissible for the beneficiaries to not be children, but to be adults? And the answer is yes, the beneficiaries may be minors or children, or they may be adults. They should fall into the categories that we listed earlier. So to recap, the range that we permit are from the middle school, high school, or secondary education, undergraduate, graduate studies, or young professionals up to age 35. And so, as I understand the question, people who are enrolled in post-secondary education or who are young professionals, in other words, people who are adults, are eligible to be beneficiaries. But again, we view all of these people as young people and as young leaders who are capable of having a significant impact in their lives and in their communities after their participation in the program. We have a question about whether the age limit applies to educators and facilitators. And the answer is no, there is no age limit for the educators and facilitators. These are the adults who are responsible for supervising and supporting and facilitating the program, and there's no age limit for these people. We have received questions about whether Stevens Initiative program participants can receive academic credit, and the answer is yes. The participants can receive academic credit if the credit is being offered by the institution through which the student is participating. So the Stevens Initiative cannot give credit itself and cannot convince an organization to offer academic credit, but that is something that the applicant could work out with their partners.
We have a question whether or not in-kind contributions or cost share counts toward the calculation of cost per participant. No, the cost per participant for the purpose of the application process is the amount of funding requested divided by the number of youth participants. We can share more about cost share at the full application stage of the award competition with you.
We have a follow-up question about beneficiaries and adults and supervision. The question is, if the beneficiaries are adults, do they still need supervision? And the answer is yes. Regardless of the age of the participants, there must be someone who is responsible for observing, for facilitating, and for ensuring that what is happening in the program is appropriate, whether the participants are, regardless of the age of the participants. This is an important role, and it's very important for the oversight of the program, given that this is supported by the Department of State, and given that Stevens Initiative programs must be operating with a very high level of quality and consistency.
We have a question on whether or not the Stevens Initiative is able to help applicants find international partners. The Stevens Initiative is not able to help find international partners during the open competition phase. Once awardees have been announced, the initiative will try to include organizations, schools, and universities, including those that submitted unsuccessful applications, in awardee programs when it is feasible.
We have a very helpful question asking, what are some of the distinguishing elements common to strong awardee programs? And the best way to learn more about strong proposals is to go look on our website, which is stevensinitiative.org, to see the list of awards that we've made in the past, to read descriptions of those programs, to see some of the impact stories that have come from those programs. That will allow you to better understand what we've supported in the past and which aspects of those programs seem to have been effective so far. So again, I suggest you visit stevensinitiative.org to find the list of our past awardees and more details about those programs. I should also add that we have shared on our website, through the link shown on the screen right now, a page that lists some of the feedback that we've given for organizations that were not successful in submitting their past letters of interest. So these would be issues or problems to try to avoid in your own proposal. We hope that that might be helpful as well. So we offer positive examples to follow, and we offer some constructive criticism as well.
Henry, we have a question on whether or not virtual exchange activities can begin in the summer of 2019 rather than the fall of 2019 as it's stated in the competition guidelines.
We think it's very important that applicants take all of the time that they need to prepare to run their virtual exchange activities. And that's why we think organizations really should stick to running their programs beginning in fall 2019 so that they have several months to get ready to run the programs. So we are open to considering other start times on a case-by-case basis, but we would strongly encourage anyone new to the field or anyone, we would strongly encourage anyone new to the field and any applicant in general to hold to that timeline. But we are open to hearing specific questions based on the circumstances of any awardee.
We have a question regarding the reporting requirements for awardees. Your specific reporting requirements will be determined based on a risk assessment. Some awardees will be required to submit monthly invoices, while some will be monthly invoices and quarterly program reports. Some applicants might be required just to submit quarterly financial reports and quarterly program reports. So it really depends where you fall in that risk assessment.
We have a follow-up question about supervision, asking if the supervision must be for every interaction or just occasionally. We try to leave this to each awardee on a case-by-case basis. The principle is that activities need to be adequately supervised to ensure that the curriculum is being followed, that young people are learning and working together appropriately, that the communication between them is occurring in a safe and appropriate manner. I think it's fair to say that programs take a variety of approaches to this, recognizing that we want the young people to be interacting as much as possible. We realize that not every interaction may be observed to the same degree, but there are many different kinds of observation. There are many different ways of ensuring that people have the ability to share feedback and share any concerns they might have about the program they're a part of. And so I do think that there are a variety of approaches, but but our review committee and the Stevens Initiative team itself does consider it to be very important that there be a plan that seems well aligned for the age of the people being served, the background that they might be coming from, something that's appropriate for the kind of technology being used. All of those factors would be part of the thinking about the appropriate kind of supervision. We have a question about where the applicant can be from or located, and the person asks Is it okay if they are based in Egypt despite being from another country? And the answer is yes. The activity or the applicant can be in any of the countries in the Middle East or North Africa that we listed on that slide, or in the United States. And their country of origin can be somewhere else, but the beneficiaries of the program, the young people being served, must be in the United States and in one or more of the countries in the Middle East and North Africa.
We have a question on what type of support the Stevens Initiative gives awardees throughout the award period. That support can come in a different variety of ways. We do host quarterly webinars, and sometimes they could be monthly, I guess, depending on the pace of it, where we will discuss I guess, facilitator support, educator support. We'll provide feedback on how to conduct the best type of virtual exchange. We will also do financial and technical support ad hoc as well. Additionally, we do read your quarterly reports. We do read your progress reports or financial reports. And so if we see issues and things that jump up there, we're definitely going to be reaching out to you to discuss those things. But we do ask that awardees take a more proactive approach to the work, and when problems arise, they bring that to us first so we can address it collectively and as a team to begin with.
I think part of our track record, as Christine describes, is that we have worked with several organizations to help them overcome challenges and barriers that they faced in their activities. That might include helping raise awareness about virtual exchange in their community so that more educators and partners are interested in getting involved. That might include helping them assess appropriate international partnerships if their knowledge of possible partners is limited. That might include connecting them with other practitioners or other awardees who have experience dealing with a challenge that the organization might be facing, through all of the regular and also ad hoc methods that Christine described. So we do try to empower our awardees to be successful and to grow and improve their programs.
We have a question on about the mechanism of technical exchange. I suppose there's a question on what type of technical platforms you can use. We are pretty flexible when it comes to the type of technical platforms you want to use. I think one thing to consider is when you're working in certain areas is that there are connectivity issues. So to make sure that you have the right technical support to encounter those types of issues when they come up is important, but we are flexible in the type of platforms you use. And I do believe some awardees have used Zoom in the past.
And I would add as well, Christine, that awardees often use a combination of tools. For example, a video conference platform like Zoom or Skype or something like that. And often something like a learning management system or a social network or some other means of facilitating communication between any video conference sessions. We do encourage people to use services that are either free or very inexpensive. There really should not be a need to build a new platform or to pay for licensing a very expensive professional platform. As Christine said, working in low bandwidth and low technology settings is very important. So we don't require any specific platform, and we think people should come up with a plan that best suits the community that they're serving. We have a question about the expertise of the members of our independent review committee. And while we don't make the list of names or biographies public in order to ensure that the process is fully independent, we do recruit people with background and expertise in many areas related to virtual exchange. Some of them are coming from an international relations or international conflict resolution background. Some have a background in study abroad or in-person exchange. Some of them have experience with education, particularly education to reach underserved communities. Some of them have experience with education technology or the high-tech sector. Some of them have experience, broadly speaking, with development or workforce development. And some of them are particularly knowledgeable about the Middle East and North Africa. So, and finally, I should say too, we do have members of the review committee who have direct experience conducting virtual exchange activities. And when we have the committee reading a proposal, people with many of those different backgrounds will read the same proposal and all provide their own feedback and scores so that we have different perspectives. So we try to make sure that we have many different people looking at one proposal to ensure that we have the best feedback possible. And we have a follow-up question about the review committee, asking how we ensure that there's no bias in the reviewing process. We take a few steps to ensure that the review process is fair and unbiased. The first is that we rigorously check all of our review committee members for any possible conflicts of interest, any involvement with any of the awardees, or any reasons why they wouldn't be able to score the applications fairly. That's something that we do in conjunction with our partners, and we are held to a very high standard of ensuring that there is no possible appearance of a conflict of interest. The second is that we do a screening interview with all prospective review committee members to ensure that they understand the purpose of the Stevens Initiative, that they understand what we mean when we talk about virtual exchange, and to ensure that they share the values of expanding access to international exchange that we have. Finally, we offer a comprehensive training and scoring rubric to ensure that all reviewers are working on the same standards and understand the criteria and the scores in a similar manner. And so for all of those reasons, we feel that our review committee is appropriately prepared to review and assess the proposals. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. We're going to end a couple minutes early. And if you have any further questions, we strongly encourage you to send us an email at stevensinitiative@aspeninst.org. Visit our frequently asked questions page, which you see listed here on the screen. And remember, to work on your proposal, please go to aspen.fluidreview.com and follow the steps to indicate which type of award you'll be applying for and to fill out your letter of interest form. Keep in mind that the application deadline is September 13th at 11:59 p.m. US Eastern Time, and you should be working on your proposal and submitting your proposal through the aspen.fluidreview.com website. So please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions, and keep in mind that we have posted a recording of our first webinar on our YouTube channel, and we'll be sharing a recording of this webinar if anyone would like to review it later, also on our YouTube channel. Thank you again so much for attending this webinar, for your interest in the Stevens Initiative, and for your commitment to helping us grow the virtual exchange field. Thanks again, and have a great day.